Hi, welcome to Nereal Miniatures. In this quick step-by-step basing tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create and paint a forest base for your wargaming miniatures. For this tutorial you won't need a lot of paints, but a few additional basing bits, but these are totally optional. We start off by adding a few of these basing bits to our base, but as previously mentioned, you don't need them. Here I am gluing this tree stump from Green Stuff World onto my base, as well as a bark chip, which is also from Green Stuff World. You could replace the bark chip by adding some cork bits to your base, for example. In the next step, you could also add other bits to your base, like skulls, mushrooms, or maybe tiny forest animals. This is totally up to your taste. Now use any kind of PVA glue and cover the flat parts of the base with it. Here I am using Army Painter's Battlefield Basing Glue. As always, you can find all the bits and paints I am using in this tutorial in the description underneath this video. In the next step, sprinkle some fine sand and small stones over your base. Make sure that the stones are not too big, and after that, let everything dry. Now we need to seal our base. Use a 50-50 mix of PVA glue and water and apply this to all the sandy areas of the base and also the bark chips. In general, bark chips are very porous and can break easily. This can lead to really bad looking results after you've painted everything up, so you need to seal them too. Our base is now ready to be primed and I used Chaos Black here. Then we need to add all the base colors and I start off by using Rhinox Hide for the ground of our base. After adding 2 thin coats of Rhinox Hide to the ground, I use a 50-50 mix of Dryad Bark and Vulkan Green to base coat the tree stump. Then use any grey you want for the stones. Here I use Mechanicus Standard Grey for the bigger stones and Karak Stone for the smaller ones, but you can paint up these stones in any color you prefer. In the next step, you can apply the base color to all the additional bits and details of your base. I added a skull to the tree stump and I painted up with Rakarth Flesh. Now cover the whole base with Agrax Earthshade, but be careful that it does not pool anywhere. The next steps involve a lot of dry brushing. I use a medium-sized dry brush and start dry brushing the ground and the tree stump with Mournfang Brown. Then I use Steel Legion Drab on the ground and the tree stump again. In the next step, I switch to a small dry brush and start dry brushing the tree stump and the skull with Rakarth Flesh. Don't apply too much pressure when dry brushing these two bits. Now it's time to work on the stones, and I use my small dry brush again and I start dry brushing the stones with Dawnstone. In the next step, I switch back to my medium-sized dry brush and I use Tyrant Skull to dry brush the stones, the skull and the ground. Be careful not to dry brush the tree stump here. We need to paint the inside of the tree stump, and I use Wraithbone as a base coat here. You're going to need 2 thin layers to achieve good coverage. Then shade the area with Seraphim Sepia. Make sure that it doesn't pool anywhere, and then relayer the inside of the tree stump with Wraithbone while keeping the shade in all the recesses. Heavily thin down Deathworld Forest with water and apply it onto all the areas on the ground where you would like to have a mossy effect, like on the tree stump or the bigger stones, for example. In the next step, we want to put a bit more emphasis on these mossy areas by shading these with Biel-Tan Green. All the paints have been applied to our base, and now it is time to make our base a bit more interesting. And in the next step we use deep forest moss and apply it all over the mossy areas on our base. Before applying the moss, we use a 50-50 mix of PVA glue and water and apply it onto the base. Here I use an older synthetic brush to apply the mixture. Now take the moss and sprinkle it over the areas where you've applied the glue and water mixture. Afterwards, make sure to keep your workspace clean, because working with moss and static grass can get very messy. In the next step, we apply the glue and water mix again onto our base, but this time in different areas, because we want to apply some leaves to our ground later on. These leaves are also taken from Green Stuff World, and no, I'm in no way sponsored by Green Stuff World. These are just the basic bits of materials I gathered and bought over the last few years. Again, sprinkle the leaves over the base and wait for everything to dry. Sometimes not all the leaves are sticking to the ground, so we need to seal everything in the next step. For sealing the base, I like to use a pipette, because if you use a brush and apply a glue and water mix, it can happen that the basing materials are sticking to your brush, and then it can get very messy. Here I applied a 50-50 mix of PVA glue and water to all the areas where the leaves are. If the mix is a bit too thin and is applied to areas where you don't want it to be, use an old brush to soak up the excess. Let everything dry, and then I use Ultra Matte Varnish by AK Interactive and apply it all over the ground to seal it, as well as to get rid of the glossy shine of the PVA glue and water mix. The varnish should also be applied to the mossy areas. When everything is dry, it's time to put some tufts onto our base. Here you can use whatever kind of tufts you want. Unfortunately, I did not have any tufts at home that were matching the autumn leaves on the ground. In the last step, you can use any black you have available and paint the rim of the base. Here I use Abaddon Black. Our forest base is finished. You can go in two totally different directions when painting a forest base. You can paint up a more jungle-like forest base or use different tufts and plants to give it a different vibe. It's totally up to your taste. I hope that you've liked this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and if you want to look for some inspiration for other kinds of bases, then check out these videos here. I hope I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!